Greetings one and all. Super Wednesdays here in the Holy Land, in the Holy Apple, and the Holy Hilltop here. We're on the 13th day of the month of Kislev. We're 10-11 days before the holiday of Hanukkah, with God's help. And bring a few seatbelts over here. As always, we're going for a ride over here. Subject today is the fascinating story of Hanukkah you've never heard before. Okay, to most of us, Hanukkah is a joyous time of year. It's like it's the Broadway script. There's a minority and they're being oppressed, and there's a majority that is oppressing, and there's the good guys and the bad guys, and it's so black and white, and eventually the good guys win. So what better script than can one give than Hanukkah being the story, this Broadway-ish kind of story, how the good guys eventually win. We look in life, it's not always the case. Or we might say that usually the good guys don't win. Many times it looks like the bad guys are winning, at least temporarily. Okay. So with that said about our attitude of Hanukkah, good guys win, it's how it's supposed to be. We're going to bring down now amazing story. 99.9% of us have never heard before. Even if you happen to be learning in a yeshiva, you've not heard of this. Okay, during the time of the destruction of the Second Temple, a little bit before the destruction of the Second Temple, during the destruction of the Second Temple, and after the destruction of the Second Temple, there were three wars. There were three wars that the Jews fought against the Romans, and these were bloody. The amount is frightening. The amount of zeros, how many Jews were killed in these three revolts, the amount of zeros in these numbers are really staggering amount of Jews that were murdered. The first Jewish revolt against the Romans came around the year 68, 69 BCE. The second revolt against the Romans was in the year 117. 117. Start from the beginning. The destruction of the temple was in the year about 70. Year 70, right, BCE. And then the next event is 117. The next revolt was the year 117 CE, during the Common Era. And last but not least was in the year 132 to 135 was the revolt of Bar Kokhba. The second revolt, which took place in the year 117. This was between the Jewish people, also in the land of Israel, but mostly the Jews that had lived in Egypt, in Alexandria, in Egypt. And the emperor at the time was none other than the wicked Trajan. It's Trajan. In Hebrew, he's known as Tarchinus or Trajanus, and we'll learn more about him as we go along. So those were the three revolts. The Hanukkah, of course, is a story which happened approximately in the year 165 BCE. So we see the story of Hanukkah, 165 BCE, the destruction of the Second Temple by the Romans in around the year 69, 70 BCE. There was between each of these periods of times, there were 70, 80 years between various revolts. Okay, let's take first the Trajan. Who was he? He was the emperor of Rome who succeeded Nerva. That was his father. From the year 98 to 117 CE, the Common Era. He was a vicious anti-Semite, and the Jews suffered terribly through his long reign. Dreaming of extending the Roman Empire beyond the countries Alexander the Great had conquered, even to fabled India, Trajan knew that Babylon, heavily populated by Jews, laid in his path. Babylonian Jews found themselves in a terrible dilemma. Should they resist the Romans, thereby possibly endangering all the Jews living under the Roman Empire? Number two, or should they fight, or should they not fight alongside their Babylonian countrymen to repulse Trajan, and thereby being accused of treason? So it was like a no-win situation, a LL, loss-loss situation. If they go against the Romans, so they might be endangering the Jews, so the Romans will want to avenge what the Jews in Babylonia did to them when they helped the Babylonian nation. On the other hand, if they don't fight alongside the Babylonian Gentiles, so they'll be considered to be treason. They have double allegiance, so problematic. Anyways, they had to make the decision, and it fell. Alarmed at the prospect of the world Jews falling under Roman domination, the Jews of Babylonia decided to join the Babylonians and fight against the Romans. Infuriated by the Jewish role in Trajan's defeat, anti-Semitic Greeks of Alexandria, Egypt, assisted by Roman troops, this is the 1-2 punch here, instigated pogroms against the Alexandrian Jews, the largest Jewish population of any city in the Roman Empire. Many Jews had assembled for prayer in the great synagogue, which was so vast that sextons standing with flags indicated the time to respond Amen. It was such a big place. The synagogue, they had these flag bearers, so you knew, there's the "What page are we on in the synagogue blues?" You know that song, yeah? What page are we on in the synagogue blues? Well, this one was, it's not only the what page are we on, but it's also when to say Amen in the synagogue blues. So, at prayers, the Jews were massacred to the last person by Trajan and the Greeks and the Romans together. When the Jews of Cyprus and Libya discovered what had happened to the empire's largest and wealthiest Jewish community in Egypt, they readied themselves to resist the inevitable attacks. Taking their preparations as a sign of incipient revolt, Trajan sent Roman legions to assist the Greeks in wiping out the Jews. To this day, this is important, church historians full of malice towards Jews have distorted these events, stating that the Jews both attempted a general uprising against Rome and engaged in wholesale massacres of Greeks and Romans. However, ancient writings of that period indicate that the true instigators were, of course, the Greeks. Okay, an amazing story. It appears in the Jerusalem Talmud, Tractate Sukkot, page 27. An amazing story about Hanukkah you've never heard. So fasten your seatbelts. We're in Egypt land here, and the emperor and his wife, the Emperor Trajan, his wife's name was Pampela. They had a child after many years. Unfortunately for the Jews, the child was born on the 9th day of Av, which was the mourning period, M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G, not as in good morning. It was the mourning period for the destruction of the second temple some 170 years before this. So the Jews were contemplating, should they, on the 9th day of Av, Jews turn off the lights, they sit on the floor, they have 1 or 2 candles in an entire building, and you could tell that they're mourning and the crying sound. They decided to go ahead and mourn for the temple. Even though there was a danger here where the entire empire of Trajan is celebrating the birth of their son. And now the Jews are crying and sitting in the darkness. It might be translated as a revolt, but they did it anyways. When you got bad luck, keeps on rolling sometimes. Let the bad luck roll. And a few months later, Elul, Tishrei, Cheshvan, Kislev, 4 months later, the son of the king and the princess passed away. Problem was that he passed away on the holiday of Hanukkah. Once again, Hanukkah, the date 165 BCE. We are now in 117 CE. So time has passed. What do? Do we go ahead and light the candles? There's men, women, and children. Entire Jewish community, the biggest Jewish community, as we read, Alexandria. What do? So the Jews decided that they were going to light the candles, even though they understood they were taking a tremendous risk. The king, the emperor, and their government, they remember very well that when this boy was born, the Jews were mourning. But they let it pass, let it slip by. But 2 strikes and you're out sometimes. This is true. It's not a coincidence that when he's born, they're mourning, and now when he dies, they're celebrating, lighting candles, when it was forbidden to light candles because there was a decree that you're not allowed to light candles. Just like in America, when something bad happens, like on a national level, so they lower the flag. In those days, they turned off the lights as a sign of mourning. That's what they would do. Now, people would look around, everything's dark, but you see all these houses with the lights, with the lights lit up. So this is taking a big risk. So they went ahead and they lit those candles. Trajan's wife, Pampela, she says to her husband, listen, What in the world are you doing? You're going out fighting against the Parthians. You're going, you're going like cross country to fight this nation called the Parthians. When you have right in your kingdom, you have an uprising going on right under your nose. The uprising of the Jewish people. They are uprising. They are showing signs of uprising against you, and they're in your kingdom. You're going to a foreign land. First, take care of business in your own backyard, Jack. So, she convinces him. It's a 10-day trip to get from wherever he is in the world on his way to fight the Parthians. And God makes a miracle. In 5 days he arrives. What takes 10 days? 5 days. Wow. I thought that only happens to the righteous people. They get places quick. There's a traffic jam, but somehow they find the way and they get to where they're going. Okay. So Trajan comes with his forces and he murders all the males of the Alexandrian community. And then he comes up to the women. What is your decision? Are you also going to light these Hanukkah candles? If you choose to light, your fate will be the same as the men. If not, you'll be saved. And the women, like beautiful Jewish women, courageous, same decision we make ourselves. The men made their decisions, we make our decisions. Yeah, right now the pants we're wearing the pants. We have the same. We will light those Hanukkah candles. And the women were murdered also. This was such a tremendous bloodbath that the Talmud tells us, the Jerusalem Talmud in Sukkot tells us that the blood became like this river. Imagine that. So much blood turns into a river. And not a river for 100 meters, but like big time. That's how it's described. Totally wiped out the Jews of the biggest Jewish community. Okay. How does that happen exactly? Think about what just went down. Maybe this is why they never taught us the story of Hanukkah. Because the story of Hanukkah that we're familiar with, has this tremendous, a great ending to it. Happy ending to it. Yo ho ho, there's pride, there's presents, and there's these jelly donuts, and celebration, you're off for school, and everything turned out rosy. What's going on over here? This wicked, may his memory be erased, Trajan. He comes, not only does he wipe out the Jewish people, but, so to speak, God helps him, and instead of 10-day trip, it becomes 5 days. What in the world is going on here? And then, after this miracle, that he's able to come there quicker, Jewish people are wiped out. Not only the males, and at least we would have some kind of saving grace, we would have females or children. He wiped out everyone. I mean, you're ruining my holiday here. It's very unusual. Aren't we taught in past, previous, present, that a person that does a mitzvah, commandment, a person that's performing a commandment, this is the outcome? Person gets blown away. He's on his way to perform a commandment. Let's look. First source in the tractate of Kiddushin, page 39, side B. There are two commandments the Talmud tells us that conclude with the words that your life will be, you will live a long life. First one is honoring one's parents, and the second one is that when a person sees a bird nest, and he wants to take the little chickens, the little chicks, so first he has to chase away the mother bird. And only then can he take the chicks, or the eggs. So, those two commandments of all the 613, only these, they tell you straight out, black and white, in your face, they tell you that those people that observe this commandment will live a long life. So what happens? So the Talmud tells us something very interesting. There is a parent tells his kid, listen, well, this is an opportunity. You know, people pay money for this. There's a group of Jews, you know, trying to make some extra bucks. Maybe they're yeshiva people trying to make those extra bucks. So they have this service that they find for you special, rare commandments. Like there's certain commandments like you'll never get to in your life, but they find it for you, you know, like they'll find this. So they're going around, you know, with their cameras looking for these nests, because how many people have ever observed that commandment of the nest? Most people have not. I was almost lucky enough to have it happen near my house, but it didn't work out. It didn't work out in the last couple of seconds. It didn't work out for me, but I was close. So there's a group of Jews making some bucks. You tell them which commandment, you know, you're interested in, and they try to arrange it for you. So, okay. So the father, he sends this child. The child, he's obedient to his father. He's observing the commandment of honoring one's fathers. Okay, so we just said, long life. And he's told by his father, you go up on the ladder, go up on this ladder, and when you get up onto the nest, chase away the mother bird and take away the chicks. Okay, he goes up the ladder, bum, 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 bum. You know what? Another one bites the dust. Falls and gets killed. Oh my God. This is a double whammy. There's only two commandments in the Torah that it says, if you observe these commandments, honoring one's father and the chasing away of the mother bird, both of them say you'll live a long life. What's going on over here? How could this be? How could this be that a person is doing a commandment and something bad happens to them? This is very difficult. So we have two cases. We have the case of Hanukkah in the year 117 CE, where the Jewish community of Alexandria, the biggest Jewish community at the time of the Roman Empire, was totally annihilated on the Jewish holiday of Hanukkah. And we have here this little boy listening to his parents. It's brought down in the story, is brought down in the Gemara. What's going on? So, to make this further aggravate the situation here, we have on Shabbat, Tractate of Shabbat, page 63, side 1. It says the following: in the name of Rabbi Chinana, the son of Edi, anyone that does a mitzvah, a commandment, anyone that fulfills a commandment, a complete commandment. Okay, not a person did 20% of a commandment, but a person that did from A to Z, performed a commandment, that person will not be given, that person will not hear bad news. Such a person, when he is on this mission to perform this commandment, and he's doing it from the beginning till the end, not cutting any corners, he's doing it from the beginning to the end, during this time where he's performing this commandment, he will not receive any bad news. Bad news will not happen. Psh, wow. Why? Because it says in the Torah that a person that performs a commandment, he will not experience anything bad. That's King Solomon telling us. Rav Asi says the following: even when a person is doing a mitzvah from A to Z, to a complete mitzvah, commandment, performing, even if there is a decree against such a person, that decree will be nullified. Very interesting. So we see, very simple, person is doing a commandment. What's going on? How about this kid? How about the entire Jewish community of Egypt? What's going on? We have an interesting personality amongst our sages. Most people know him as Acher, somebody else. We don't say his name. Originally, his name was Rabbi Elisha ben Avuya, Elisha the son of Avuya. He was tremendous scholar, a tremendous sage. And he went OTD, off the derech, off the path. So the Talmud, the Jerusalem Talmud says, what event brought this tremendous sage, scholar, righteous person, what brought him to become a scoffer, a non-believer? Listen to this. This is in Jerusalem Talmud, Chagiga, page 9, side B. Once Elisha ben Avuya was in the neighborhood of Genisar. Ginusar is another name for Tiberias, for the Kinneret, Lake Kinneret. He was in that area, and he's watching, he sees a man climbing up a tree, and this man climbs up a tree, and he takes complete the nest, the eggs or the chicks, and the mother, just takes it complete, walks down, comes down that ladder, and he's off to see the wizard. He's fine. Okay. A few minutes later, sees on another tree, sees somebody going up and climbing up, and this person, no, this guy is, he's a religious guy, he's got this black hat, this black long coat. He goes up, he's climbing up the tree, and he sees the nest, and he chases away the mother bird, and he takes the little chicks for himself. He comes down the ladder, he gets down to the bottom of the ladder, and then, pow, a snake comes, and one of these poisonous snakes comes out of nowhere, bites the dude, he is gone. Now folks, if you're still sitting here and you're not shaking your head and you're not getting up and screaming, it's an amazing thing. Elisha ben Avuya, the sage, the scholar, the righteous, he's looking. He sees two cases. One person violates, a Jew that violates the law. He takes the entire nest, the little babies, and the mother. He takes it all. And nothing happens to that guy. 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, we have a guy in his black coat, and he has the side curls hanging down, and the strings hanging out, and he's going up on that, and he makes sure that he shoos away that mother bird. And he makes sure, and he gets down, boom, a snake bites him. That was enough for him. No more of this Judaism for me. I'm OTD. I'm off the derech. I'm off the path. When bad things happen to good people, there's a lot of good people that throw it all away. Say, where's God? What's our answer? What's our answer for ourselves, for our family, for the world? What's going on here? A tremendous, tremendous contradiction. On one hand, just to summarize it, we see that a person that does a commandment, performs a commandment from the beginning to the end, no bad news will happen to them at the time that they're performing this commandment. Not only that, if there's a decree against them, it could be annulled by God. We see that Elisha ben Avuya, a tremendous scholar, sage, went off the path when he saw something like this, a commandment, especially this commandment. It's interesting how he could have seen other things where something good happened and something bad happened to a person, but specifically this commandment with the birds, because of the fact that it does say, he says, in fact, the Talmud goes on, and he says straight out, Elisha ben Avuya says straight out, I don't understand. It says in the verse that a person that shoos away the mother bird, God will be good to them and they will live a long life. Lemani tavlach verachta yamim. Where's the good life of this person? He just died. Where is the longevity of this person? He just passed away. He looks like he's 30 years old. And he threw it all away. He threw it all away. Okay. So, where do we go from here? We have to take it from the bottom. Start seeing where to start tackling this question. Okay. It says in many places, we'll just state two. It says in Echa Rabbah, it says in chapter 1, paragraph 48. Also, it says in the Mechilta, in Exodus, chapter 14, verse 13. It says also in the tractate, in the Jerusalem Talmud, tractate of Sukkot, the 5th chapter, page is it on? Page 37. It says the following, in the name of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Shimon Bar Yochai says that God warned the Jewish people in 3 different places in the Torah not to go back to Egypt. You know, go down Moses, right? 3 places in the Torah. Where are they? Place number 1, Exodus 14:13. We just mentioned it. 2nd, Deuteronomy 17:16. 3rd, Deuteronomy 28:68. Go check it out. God warns us 3 places, which means, in black and white language, folks, a person that goes down and to live in Egypt, they have just violated 3 negative commandments of the Torah. There is rumors. There are different opinions on this, but there are commentaries that wrote that Maimonides, who did live in Egypt, and he was the doctor of the king of Egypt in his time, he would sign his name. When he would sign his name, he would say, Maimonides, who transgresses every single day 3 negative commandments. That's how he would sign his name. Imagine that, you know, like you go to one of these places where they have you, like you could buy a stamp, you know, your insignia, and it's like a long sucker, like you have to give your name, and then who's transgressing every single day. That's a long one. But that's how he signed his name. Once again, there are those that disagree that he signed this way, but there are many views that said that, yes, that's how he would sign his name. So this is a pretty serious transgression. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai goes on, and he tells us, there were 3 times, 3 verses, right? We said there are 3 negative commandments, and there were 3 times during Jewish history, okay? We'll call it Torah, biblical times, that the Jews transgressed this prohibition and went down to live in Egypt. And they give the list. First time that this happened was in the time of the king of Assyria. His name was Sancheriv. This is 40 years before the destruction of the first temple. 40 years before the first destruction of the first temple. Sancheriv was the man who dispersed the 10 tribes. When he dispersed them, they weren't called the lost, because they weren't lost yet. He made them lost. So at the time, one of the kings of Israel's name was Hoshea ben Ale. He went and he took people down to reside, to live in Egypt. A king of Israel took down these people to live in Egypt, and they were destroyed. That's the first time. Second time, there's in various sources, it gives a different name. Certain sources tell us that in the time of Chonio the fourth, yeah, they just had today, I know with my kids, when they have to decide a name, it usually takes them a couple of weeks till they get the name. But when it's so simple, like when you're just called Leroy, and then your son is called Leroy Jr., and then you have Leroy Senior, and then you have Leroy Jr. It's very easy. You don't have to think too much about a name for a person, because you just keep the same names, right? You just recycle the names. So this guy Chonio, he's number 4. The same name just kept on being recycled over here. So according to some of our sources, the second skipped over. Take that back. Second time this happened was after the destruction of the first temple, in the time of Gedaliah, the son of Achikam. This story is brought down in Jeremiah from chapters 40 to 43 approximately. An amazing story. This person named Yochanan ben the son of Kareach, he warned Gedaliah that a Jew named Ishmael, what's a nice Jewish boy doing with the name Ishmael? Ishmael, the son of Netaniah, he is going to kill you. So Yochanan comes and he's warning Gedaliah that he's going to be killed. Now, Gedaliah was given the appointment by the king of Babylonia, that he would be allowed, Gedaliah would be allowed to bring in a certain amount of Jews back to the land of Israel and live here and work the land and live here. This was a tremendous saving grace for the Jewish people. Imagine someone's inviting you in after you've been destroyed, after the Babylonians destroyed the Jews and the Beit HaMikdash and the temple. So he allowed these Jews to remain in the land of Israel. There was still hope. As long as there are Jews in the land of Israel, there is hope for the future. If there are none, no. So Gedaliah was the person who was responsible for the Jewish people. He was the one that had to come to the emperor and deal deal with him. So he's warned, but he does not take the warning seriously. Why? Because he's a religious person, and he does not want to hear evil speech, lashon hara. So he's closing his ears, and putting his fingers in his ear. And he's going, na 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 na. He goes, I don't hear anything. But sure enough, sometime later, Yishmael, the son of Netanya, comes and blows away Gedaliah. And he wasn't, he did not have any guards with him. Okay, so Yochanan, son of Kareach, comes to the prophet Jeremiah. He says, listen, I'm really worried here because I think that now that they see there's some kind of uprising the Jews are doing, it doesn't matter that, that we received the blow. The good guys received the blow. But still, Ishmael was a Jew. And they will take this as some kind of revolt and they'll kill us. So can you please contact God on your special God phone? There's an iPhone and there's the G phone, the God phone. And tell us what to do. So Yirmiyahu gets back to him. Listen, I was on the G phone. And God says, stay here. Everything will be cool. Everything okay. Yochanan gets up. And, in the time of the golden calf, lehavdil, the opposite, but the Levites got up and said, whoever's with God is come with me. So Yochanan raised up his hand and said, whoever wants to survive, you come with me. And he goes down to Egypt, and he's welcomed there in Egypt, and he brings down, thousands of Jews, and he buys fields, and he's there. Later on, that Jewish community was destroyed. That's the second time. Third time is this Chenyo, the fourth. There's a whole story with him and his brother, but they made their way in the year 170 BCE. So imagine that. The temple is still in Jerusalem. 170 BCE. He goes down and he sets up this entire Jewish community. Not only an entire Jewish community, he also builds a temple. Yeah, in Germany about 2-3 years ago, they built a Western Wall. Somewhere, the Jews built a Western Wall in Germany. So, why pay a ticket to go to the land of Israel? We have the wall, as Pink Floyd would say. All in all, it's just another brick in the wall. No extra charge for that Pink Floyd song. Okay. But, so we have the wall already. You ever been to New York? Jerusalem pizza. Who needs to go to Jerusalem for pizza, Len? We got it right here in Manhattan, Jerusalem. And then there's Jerusalem pizza, and there's Jerusalem 1, and there's Jerusalem 2. Yeah, it's just great. Who needs it? So he builds this temple, like an amazing thing. He builds this temple, and you have guys running around in the priestly garments, like he makes up these garments for people. We're in the middle of Egypt here, baby, and here we have, what's going on over here? That temple of his lasts for 243 years. From the year 170 BC to 73 CE. Now, to understand this, once again, there is a temple in Jerusalem. It exists. This is 5 years. This temple went up 5 years before the story of Hanukkah. The story of Hanukkah took place in 165 BCE, for the Common Era. So this story is 5 years before that. The Jews go down to Egypt and set up a temple. Maimonides comes by and says, what's going on over here? These people are chayav karet. I mean, that's the most serious, like to be excommunicated because of the fact what they're doing here, sacrifices in Egypt. That's Maimonides. That's what he says. The Talmud tells us that these people, these priests, were not allowed to do priestly work. If they would ever come back to Jerusalem, they were not allowed to work. Any vessels that they had which copied the temple you were not able to use them. These people were transgressing various negative commandments. So in the year 73 CE, so this is like a couple years after the temple was destroyed. The temple was destroyed. There's a few opinions on it. 68, 69, 70 CE. And this was destroyed 5-6 years later. Another opinion of the third event, that Jews as a community went down to Egypt, negating the law, negating the 3 negative commandments, was in the time of Trajan. And we know from our class today what was the final result of that one. So around the time that Trajan was the emperor, as we said, he was the emperor from 98 to 117 CE. Around that time, Jews had set them up in Alexandria, and they were wiped out on Hanukkah. They were wiped out in the year 117 on the holiday, happy holiday of Hanukkah. Okay, so we see very clearly, Torah tells us, do not go down to Egypt. And if you do, you will be punished 3 times. We'll summarize them. Number 1, in the time of the dispersion of the 10 tribes, before the destruction of the first temple, 40 years. In the times of Sancherib, the king who took down the Jews was Hoshea ben Aleh. Second was in the time. The second was in the time after the destruction of the first temple, when Jews were allowed to come back to the land of Israel by the Babylonians, led by Yochanan, the son of Kareach. That was the second time. Third is either Chenio the fourth or Trajan. You pick it. And the results weren't pretty. Okay. So, why did they fall? Listen to this. Amazing. I'm not making it up. A book written about 10 years ago called Lev Avraham. It was printed in New York. No offense to the New Yorkers. But in his book called Lev Avraham, listen to what he writes. Listen to what he writes. He asked the question we asked here. How could it be? There are Jews, they're lying, they're endangering their lives. They are sacrificing their lives for God in order to light the candles of Hanukkah. And the whole community is wiped out, men, women, and children. What is going on here? So something must have been off with them. And you know what was off with them? You know what was wrong with the Jewish community, he writes, in Egypt? Listen to this one. The problem was that the law says, Jewish law, quote unquote, tells us then in such circumstances, when there's a danger to one's life during the holiday of Hanukkah, and you have the choice whether to light candles or not, baby, you keep your head low and don't light those candles. You take care of your life. Life comes before the lighting of candles, which is a rabbinical commandment. And therefore, because of the fact that they transgressed the law, and they endanger themselves. So because of the fact that they put themselves in danger, this itself is a transgression, because that's not the law. And no matter how great their sacrifice, self-sacrifice was, and willingness to lose their lives, this was a transgression. This was not a sanctification of God's name. This was not self-sacrifice. This was a transgression of the law. And that's why they paid the price. Because no matter how much self-sacrifice you have, how much you're willing to pay a price, your life, a monetary price, no matter how self-sacrifice you have, once you went against Jewish law, doesn't matter how much self-sacrifice you have, you lose. You transgress the law, off with your head. Whoa. I mean, that is pretty heavy. An entire Jewish community, men first, gave their lives for lighting of the candles. And then the women, come up to the women, what's with you? Kill us. We're going to light the candles also. Children. A book in New York comes out. Of course they were killed. Transgressed the law. They went against the law. Not only did they transgress the law, they committed suicide. Because of the fact that they transgressed the Jewish law, which says that you are not allowed to endanger yourself for the lighting of Hanukkah, not only did they not do Mesirut Nefesh, sacrifice, not only did they not do a sanctification of God's name, but actually they committed suicide. They committed suicide because of the fact they put themselves in such a predicament. It is if they killed themselves. That's black and white. You could check it out. 86, Lev Avraham, page 86. Okay. So, the rabbi tells us, the Lev Avraham, he tells us that this was the sin. This to me is a tremendous eye-opener. Why? Because we just got finished 10 minutes sitting here, standing here, reading the words of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. The words of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. We're talking about a book that came out 10 years ago. We're not talking, and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, we're talking about the time of the Romans 2,000 years ago. And he says straight out that 3 historical events happened to the Jewish people where they negated the commandment, thank you, the commandment to go down to Egypt. And because of the fact that they transgressed 3 negative commandments, 3 times it says in the Torah, don't do it. Don't go down to Egypt. So isn't it obvious that perhaps the reason why they were blown away was the fact that they were living in Egypt in sin?
Well, why is it a stira? Can it be both reasons? One necessarily, there can be several reasons for why they
Doesn't say. He doesn't write that.
His own reason. He doesn't necessarily say what Rabbi Shimon said is wrong.
He doesn't bring down Rabbi Shimon. He leaves that part out. He just brings down the case. He brings down the case in the Talmud, Jerusalem Talmud, tells us that's the reason why. Because of the fact that they transgressed. Okay, they transgressed the law of the laws of sanctifying God's name. In this predicament, it wasn't called for. Therefore, they're murderers. They're suicide bombers. So it's obvious. Okay, now this, as I said, this, what I said in the name of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, it's brought down in many, 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 many sources. I just gave 3, but you can find it in many, many sources. So it's black and white. It says that in black and white. In fact, there's a commentator on the words of our sages in Eicha, in the Lamentation book. He asked this question. How could it be? We have a rule in Judaism. Shlichei mitzvah einam nizokin. We spoke about this at the beginning of the class. How could this be? That bad things happen to good people as they're doing commandments. I can understand something bad happen to a good person when he's asleep. Or something's bad happening to a person when maybe he's not doing what he's supposed to do. But we have a concept. This is in the Talmud that we stated, Kiddushin 39b, says that if you are a messenger to do a commandment, you've been given a job to perform a commandment, someone gives you money and they tell you, I want you to go to Joe Schmo and give him this money, he's in dire straits. So you are, right now, you are a messenger to do a commandment, and nothing bad will happen to you, says the Talmud. So, the commentator, the Yafa Mara, he asked this question. How could it be that the Jews of Egypt, Alexandria, were destroyed? How could that be? And one of his answers is that they were living in sin. They were living in Egypt, and that was a sin. And therefore, they did not have merit to protect them, even though they happened to be doing a mitzvah. Doing a mitzvah. Okay, that's what he says. Number 2, let's look at the Jewish community. Let's look at the Jewish community of Egypt. It says, listen to this. It says in the book Sharei Nechama by Rabbi Yehuda Chanzar on page 328, he says the reason why the Jews were punished in Alexandria and Egypt because of the fact that they went down to Egypt. We've heard that before. He also gives another reason, that they played sports on Shabbat. In Alexandria, the Jews would partake in sports on Shabbat. Think about the situation in the land of Israel. How many soccer teams here, unfortunately, play on Shabbat? There's only a handful that do not play on Shabbat. So this is a very serious matter. It's such a serious matter that a community, according to the Sharei Nechama, a whole Jewish community was destroyed. Number 2. So far we have three problems with the Jewish community of Egypt. Number 1, they were living there, problematic, said by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in many places. Number 2, we see that they participated in sports on Shabbat. Number 3 is forgetting about the land of Israel. Forgetting about the land of Israel. We spoke how Chenyo, the 4th, built a temple, built a duplicate of the Beit HaMikdash, the temple in Jerusalem. People would go during the holidays, during the 3 festival holidays of Passover and Sukkot and Shavuot, they would go to Egypt. They would go to Egypt and say, here, we are fulfilling God's will. We are fulfilling God's will. and we are bringing sacrifices to the temple. I mean, this is like taking the place of the land of Israel. This is a replacement theory of the land of Israel. So, in what Chenyo, what he did in Egypt with the temple and bringing priests there and sacrificing, this was a terrible slap in the face to the land of Israel, and of course Jerusalem, and of course the temple itself. Along with that, we have another source which brings this point out in a book called Midrash Eser Galuyot on page 436. It says that in the days of Yochanan, the son of Kireach, this was after the first temple was destroyed by the Babylonians, when he moved with many Jews to Egypt, he settled in the city of Alexandria, and he bought there many fields, and he bought there many vineyards. He bought up many vineyards, and the Jews were multiplying. They were very well-to-do, and in fact, they were so well-to-do, and they multiplied so much that they were double the amount of the Jews that left Egypt. Think about that one. How many Jews left Egypt? Approximately 5 million. If you do the math, right, the Torah tells us one detail, that between the ages of 20 and 60, there were 600,000 Jews. But if you do their wives, and you do people below the age of 20, and you do people above the age of 60, where you got 5 million approximately people. So think about this. There were 10 million Jews. 10 million Jews. Now they set up, forget the temple, the synagogue that they had. The Talmud tells us that if you didn't see that building, you've never seen beautiful buildings before. I know that we have Mo here. He's a builder and he builds, beautiful structures and houses. But I'm sorry to say this. It says in the Talmud, if you didn't see that synagogue, we'll call it the Great Synagogue of Egypt. If you didn't see it with your own eyes, you've never seen beauty before. I mean, I'm not even going into the details of the gold and the silver and the bronze that was there. What's going on? That's where we're putting our bucks. We're buying up fields. We're buying up vineyards. We're settling in. So, sin number 3, a slap in the face. A replacement of the land of Israel, and a replacement to Jerusalem and the Holy Temple. Last but not least, and then we'll continue with God's help next week. Last sin. In the book Megillat Eliyahu, page 282, brings out an amazing idea. It says in the book of Echa Rabbah, chapter 2, paragraph 4. Ask a question. The sages ask a question. Why were the Jews of Beitar destroyed? Why were the Jews of Beitar destroyed? Now, the book Megillat Eliyahu, like many, many other books, they take a certain source which is seemingly just talking about the time of Bar Kokhba and saying, no, it is really talking about the period of the Jews under the Roman Empire. That's what it's really talking about. This is brought down in many, many books. So he writes here that not only is this true about why the Jews of Beitar fell, it's also true about why the Jews of Egypt fell. What happened? Listen to this one. When the temple fell in the year 68, 69, 70 CE, the Jews were mourning, except not all Jews were mourning. The Jews who lived in Beitar, and also the Jews who lived in Egypt, according to Megillat Eliyahu, they celebrated the destruction of the temple. Celebrated? What's going down? Our sages go on to tell us what happened to these poor people. The people of Beitar, the people from Egypt, when they would come up to Jerusalem and they would want to bring a sacrifice, they were taken advantage by the people in Jerusalem. And taking advantage in a big way. I'm not going to go into all the details right now. But they cursed out the day that they came up, that they went to the temple in Jerusalem. They cursed out that day. I should never, it's too bad I didn't break my legs. Can you imagine that, breaking your legs? It's too bad we didn't break our legs. That's what it says. Look it up. Eicha 2:4. Eicha Rabbah. And listen to this. So we see here that people celebrated the destruction of the second temple by the Romans. So we see 4 or 5 possible transgressions that the Jewish community of Egypt, Alexandria, had, even though they had sacrificed themselves for the commandment of lighting, the rabbinical commandment of lighting candles. A person is made up, is an entire entity. We don't just look at, everybody does good deeds at a certain time in their lives. People are willing to sacrifice themselves for the minute. Sacrifice themselves for the minute, as long as it's over after that. Even the Talmud tells us that the superheroes of Judaism, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, if they would have been tortured, they would have not sacrificed themselves. Which means they were willing to give up their lives as long as it took a few seconds and then it was over. But more than that, they would not have been able to stand up. So we see that there were various transgressions that unfortunately affected the outcome of this situation. And don't forget, stay with us next week, God willing. We will continue the story of the tragic story of the Jews in Egypt. And we will see, though, an entire different light and picture of how great they actually were. Though they did have various transgressions, we will see how beautiful and how we are enjoying till this day their sacrifice and giving up their lives for the commandment of Hanukkah. So don't touch that dial.